True knowledge stands the test of time. To remain relevant and impactful, it must be continuously created and recreated. This is the ethos of the International Conference on Infrastructure Development and Sustainability, popularly known as ICIDS, where ideas ignite, collaborations flourish, and knowledge evolves for the greater good. Good morning and warm greetings to all of you. On behalf of Adani University and the conference organizing committee, I, Dr. Baishali Mitra, Associate Professor, Faculty of Management Sciences, deem it a privilege to extend a warm welcome to the distinguished dignitaries, esteemed speakers, researchers, delegates, the conference partners, media personnel, and everyone present here at the second edition of the conference ICIDS 2024. The theme of the conference is Emerging Agenda in Sustainable Infrastructure Development, Green Transition, and Financing. With a focus on equitable green financing, digital innovation, and circular economy, the next 2 days of the conference will feature insightful deliberations, panel discussions, and technical presentations to develop actionable models that is likely to reshape the landscape of infrastructure development, fostering conscious and responsible economic growth. ICIDS 2024 is strengthened by the unwavering support and visionary leadership of our patron and president of Adani University, Dr. Preeti G. Adani. Now it's time to invite our esteemed dignitaries to grace the dais. With appreciation, gratitude, and a huge round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome on stage our esteemed chief guest, Professor Arun Sharma, a renowned scholar, recipient of Royal Order of Australia, Vice President of Adani University. Professor Sharma was a member of the World Economic Forum. He has fostered business research and cultural links between Australia and India. We welcome you on stage, Professor Sharma. May I now invite our guest of honor and keynote speaker, Professor Bharat Dahiya, Director, Research Center for Sustainable Development and Innovation, School of Global Studies, Thammasat University, Thailand. Professor Dahiya, a scholar with immense practice experience at platforms such as the United Nations University and UN Habitat. Welcome you on stage, Professor Dahiya. It is a privilege to invite now Professor Ravi P. Singh, an eminent academic leader, Provost, Adani University. We welcome you on the dais, sir. I would like to invite on stage Conference Chair, Professor Rachna Gangwar, and Professor Anurima Mukherjee Basu, Professors of Faculty of Management Sciences, Adani University. Thank you, honorable dignitaries, for gracing the occasion. To commence this conference on an auspicious note, we will now proceed with the ceremonial lighting of the lamp, a symbol of enlightenment, knowledge, and the dispelling of darkness. I kindly invite our esteemed dignitaries on the dais to light the lamp and mark the beginning of this significant event. May we all rise for the Saraswati Vandana and lighting of the lamp.
Ya kundendu tushara
May Goddess Saraswati's blessings inspire meaningful discussions and insights throughout the day. Moving forward, to set the stage for the discussion ahead, it is my pleasure to invite the thinking mind behind the conference chair, Professor Rachna Gangwar.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vaishali Mitra. Very good morning, esteemed dignitaries on the dais, distinguished speakers, delegates, sponsors, partners, and all participants. On behalf of the organizing committee, it is an honor and a privilege to welcome you to the second International Conference on Infrastructure Development and Sustainability. This conference, as called ICIDS, makes a significant milestone in universities' endeavor to be at the forefront of infrastructure education and research. The conference offers a platform for practitioners, academicians, and policymakers to come together and discuss pursuits of infrastructure development that is not only sustainable and technologically advanced, but also equitable and financed through green initiatives. The first conference was held in 2021 with a focus on sustainability and resilience. This year's theme, Emerging Agenda in Sustainable Infrastructure Development, Green Transition and Financing, focuses on some of the most critical global issues such as climate change, urbanization, green financing, and social equity, to ensure that infrastructure development not only meets the demands of today, but also contributes to a more sustainable and equitable future, is a challenge that policymakers continue to grapple with. So some of the key questions that the conference seeks to address across various infrastructure domains are, so what are the emerging trends of infrastructure development in developing countries, and how do they impact the overall growth? How are these trends transforming the infrastructure ecosystem, and what new opportunities and challenges are rising? What challenges do policymakers encounter in aligning infrastructure development with sustainability and climate objectives, and how can these be overcome? So, over the course of the two-day conference, we will have 4 panel discussions, a fireside chat, and several technical sessions focused on the conference theme. We are bringing together more than 25 distinguished infrastructure experts from academia, industry, and government who will engage in insightful discussions, sharing their expertise on the important issues faced by the sector. The panel will cover a wide range of critical topics across key infrastructure sectors. The first panel will discuss emerging trends in urban and regional transportation systems, exploring innovative approaches to mobility. The second panel will focus on green transition and the path towards sustainable infrastructure, examining solutions for a greener future. The third panel will address the unique challenges and opportunities of the urban transformation, offering insights into the evolving landscape of Indian cities. The fourth panel will examine the pivotal role of the PPPs in driving infrastructure development. The panel discussions will be followed by a fireside chat session, offering further insights into the emerging agenda and challenges faced by industries. We believe that the deliberations will be engaging and enriching for you. We look forward to 60 research papers on day 2 that will be presented across several technical tracks aligned with the conference theme. The research papers contributed by scholars from across the country and abroad are a valuable scholarly output of the conference. The book of abstracts that collates the theme of these research papers is already published, providing an overview of the work being done by the scholars. We are also pleased to share that the conference proceedings will be published by Taylor & Francis. The book will include research papers and invited contributions from domain experts. the conference proceedings from the previous conference is Scopus indexed. We remain optimistic that this year's conference proceedings will receive the same scholarly recognition. I'm confident that this conference will serve as a platform for meaningful dialogue and collaborations. Thank you for your participation, and I hope you have a wonderful and enriching experience. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Gangwar, for setting the tone so precisely. It's a privilege to have with us on the dais Professor Ravi P. Singh, Provost of Adani University. Professor Singh is a distinguished academic leader with a career spanning roles such as Secretary General of the Quality Council of India, Director and Senior Regional Director of IGNOU, Vice Chancellor of Sharda University, Senior Leader at Punjab Technical University, and Regulator with AICTE, a gold medalist from BHU and a PhD and postdoctorate from the University of Western Ontario. He has shaped educational policies and programs in India. Honored with a DSc and several other accolades, Professor Singh's vision continues to drive excellence in education and research. It's a pleasure to invite Professor Singh to extend the welcome address.
Respected Professor Arun Sharma, Professor Bharat Daya, our friends on the dais and off the dais, my faculty members, the delegates coming from various cities and towns across India, and my fellow students. Welcome to the second International Conference on Infrastructure Development and Sustainability. We have, in fact, as you all might know, Adani University is a new university, established only in the year 2022. But what you can see is that we are pretty rooted in fulfilling the sustainability sustainable development goals set by the UN. And if you enter into the campus, you will see that all the sustainable development goals are very prominently displayed, which reminds us almost every day what we need to do and how we need to do it. While a lot has been done in the past few years as far as India is concerned on infrastructure and energy, there is a lot which needs to be done in the next 25 years as India enters into the Amrit Kal and believes that it will be a Viksit Bharat in the next 25 years. We consider ICIDS as a platform to keep reminding ourselves almost every day what and how we must propel India into the growth trajectory around the world so that it is considered to be a shining light for the entire world. Let me give you only 3 issues that we had in fact discussed while making the agenda for ICIDS. There are in fact a lot more which has been added, but the 3 major issues that we wanted to discuss out here was infrastructure development, the energy transition, and the climate change. And therefore, I would only pin my thoughts on these 3 issues. Indian growth story as far as infrastructure development is concerned is pretty amazing as far as last almost 10 years is concerned. You will see that in the last 10 years, we have increased metro coverage almost 3 times in Indian cities. We have built more than 100,000 kilometers of national highways in the last 10 years. We have almost doubled the number of airports in India. We have almost doubled the handling capacity of ports, and Adani Group is contributing a lot into that. We have built almost 111 national waterways which have been identified and notified. Electrification of railway lines totaling somewhere around 40,000 kilometers have been completed. And all this makes the multimodal delivery system very easy to implement. Besides that, we have built about 12 crore, almost 120 million new toilets which were constructed during the last 10 years. Almost 50 million new homes were built for India's aspiring generation, aspiring people, the equivalent of providing every resident of Spain a new house. We have built 250 million people, equivalent to the population of Brazil, now have access to piped water supply. We have electrified households, and the numbers have doubled in the last 10 years. And we have achieved the second largest road length globally, which tells you that we have done exceedingly well as far as the infrastructure growth story is concerned. This is not a mean achievement, and this is a story of incredible growth, incredible infrastructure, incredible transformation, which comes under the ambit of Incredible India. What we further need to do, which we are going to discuss out here, was that we need to empower states and local governance to speed up the infrastructure development at the ground level. Yesterday, I had a small discussion with Dr. Bharat Dahiya, and we wanted to identify what is it that is maybe holding us a little back. And one of the issues that were identified was governance. We also need to train people in the infrastructure sector for basic skills of construction, safety, assessment for safety and security of buildings, roads, bridges, etc. And therefore, I'm happy that some of my accredited inspection and certification bodies are part of this second ICIDS. How do we contribute to this story? Adani University started last year a course, a 5-year integrated course on infrastructure engineering and project management. And we believe that in the next 4 or 5 years, we would be able to give the country a very good set of skilled manpower who can drive the Indian story forward. The second important agenda that we need to discuss is the energy transition. Energy transition, again, India has done very well. The net energy generation in India stands somewhere around 452 gigawatt, out of which almost 50%, and this is a very important milestone for us, that almost 50% is non-fossil fuel energy. Currently, non-fossil fuel stands at about 200 gigawatts. Among this, 50% is solar, 25% is wind, and 25% is hydro and others. India intends to reach 500 gigawatt of energy generation by 2030. But I believe with the kind of infrastructure that we are developing and the pace at which we are developing, we would need 500 gigawatt much earlier than 2030. Adani Group has a lot of interest as far as energy is concerned, green energy is concerned, including solar and hydrogen. Arun Sharma sir is already here, so he would be speaking a lot about energy and energy transition, as well as what the world is thinking about as far as energy transition is concerned. Again, how do Adani University intends to give wind to the wings of India as far as energy is concerned? We have decided to offer a 5-year integrated course in energy engineering and energy management from next year onwards. We'll have a cohort of 60, and we will recruit people from all around the world, including all states of the country. The third and most important is climate change. All those of you who live in Delhi know the environmental pollution that we succumb to almost every winter. And this is primarily an issue which has been, in fact, discussed at various forums in the country as well as around the world. And there are two issues to it. One is carbon emission, and the other, as I identify, is the methane emission. Carbon, as you might know, would stay in the atmosphere for centuries, if not decades. And methane stays in the environment for almost 10 years. And both contribute heavily to climate change. We know the focus of climate change and the commitments the industry is making in order to reduce the emission of carbon as well as methane. Methane, in fact, is a potent greenhouse gas that accounts for almost 30% of the climate warming the planet experiences today. The other important technological advancement which has been done recently is that there is a new satellite, MethaneSat, which is now monitoring the methane emission around US, and they are going to pretty soon expand it to oil and gas companies across the world. Most of the industries have almost committed, and again, at the World Economic Forum as well as COP, these issues were discussed. The companies suggest in the developed countries that they will reduce methane emission to almost 90% in the next 5 years. India, on the other hand, is still lagging a little behind, because there is, as far as I am aware, there is no concerted task force on methane emissions. And this would require that the task force looks into the data of MethaneSat and makes policies for the next 10 years. In fact, we are very sure that the global oil and gas companies who are committing to it, and in fact, India, as far as methane emission is concerned, stands at the 4th place behind China, Russia, and US. And our methane emission is only 1/3 that of China. And therefore, we need to, in fact, scale it up and speed it up so that we are able to reduce methane emissions as well as carbon emissions in order to protect the climate and the effect of these two gases on climate change. These are the only 3 things that I wanted to say, primarily because I'm not an expert in the field, and you have 2 very important people who would be discussing about all these issues. But let me conclude by saying that through this conference, we want to generate ideas which can help the nation grow economically as well as socially. The only caveat which we in a democracy place on ideas generated in academic circles is the following. We always want ideas which are generated to be tested on 8 basic pillars. The pillars are that the idea has to be politically acceptable, it has to be socially desirable, it has to be technologically feasible, it has to be financially viable, it has to be administratively doable, it has to be judicially tenable, it has to be emotionally relatable, it has to be environmentally sustainable. If we as academicians can keep all these 7 tenets while proposing ideas, I believe India as a nation and policymakers in general would be able to operate on the ideas that are generated out of these conferences. I hope the congregation here will help us identifying the ideas which fulfill all these caveats. Thank you very much. Jai Hind.
Thank you very much, sir. Your address set the pitch for the day and reminded us of the importance of the themes we are about to explore for a self-reliant India and a Vikasit Bharat. Moving to the next segment, the keynote address of the conference, I wish to introduce our guest of honor and keynote speaker, Dr. Bharat Dahiya, Director, Research Center for Sustainable Development and Innovation, School of Global Studies, Thammasat University, Thailand. Dr. Bharat Dahiya is a highly experienced professional in sustainable urban development, having held leadership roles in international organizations and academic institutions. He has advised ministers, mayors, and governments on strategic guidance, policy, development, and technical support, and collaborated with prominent organizations such as the World Bank, UN Habitat, Asian Development Bank, UNDP, United Nations University, and Metropolis. His expertise includes leading project teams, building partnerships, mobilizing resources for research and advisory services, and conducting applied research resulting in influential reports, including the United Nations Inaugural Report on the State of Asian Cities. His areas of expertise encompass sustainable urbanization, climate change, urban innovation, cultural landscapes, urban planning, and community-led development. It is an absolute privilege to invite you, Dr. Dahiya, to address the gathering.
Namaste, very good morning to all of you. Honorable Professor Arun Sharmaji, Professor Ravi Singh, Excellencies, experienced elders, dignitaries, delegates, friends, colleagues. It's absolute privilege to be here, and I would like to thank Adani University for this opportunity to be of some service to all of you. The title of my presentation, if we can go there, please. We can go from the beginning. Is charting a path towards sustainable infrastructure development. Before I prepared this keynote, I had a discussion with the conference chairs, and so whatever I'm sharing with you is something, a responsibility that has been given to me. I'm sure you are familiar with these ideas, but the whole point here is to set a framework after what Ravi Singh ji has said, and then what follows after that. So let's begin. I have about 25 minutes. So I have divided this in 5 parts. First, we will look at the vision and mission, which is the Asian century, as well as developed India. Second, we will look at some challenges for sustainable infrastructure development. Third is the massive gaps. There is a lot being done, but there is more to be done. And some guiding factors which should be guiding our work, not only in terms of research, teaching, and so on, but in actual infrastructure development. And lastly, some complications related to policy and decision making, and maybe a couple of examples to show you how some of the things are being done outside India. Okay, so first is the momentum towards the Asian century and developed India. When the century turned, or you may remember that when the millennium turned, we were thinking that this will be an Asian century. And so there are 5 dimensions based on which an Asian century is possible. The first is aspirational or cultural. Here I would like to quote Tenshin Okakura, a Japanese scholar. He wrote this thing about 121 years ago, that Asia is one, the Himalayan divide, only to accentuate 2 mighty civilizations, the Chinese with its communism of Confucius, remember this is being written in 1903, and the Indian with its individualism of the Vedas. So this is the cultural aspirational dimension of the Asian century. And then we have the developmental. So a couple of years ago, the mission of Viksit Bharat was launched, and we are now in the Amrit Kal moving forward. Third is economic. And the past 10-15 years of ups and downs in economy, including COVID, finally has brought us back to the idea of growth. And it says in the last quote, this is from World Economic Forum, that it is the Asian century looks set forth to return. Then the most important issue of all, which threatens our very lives and livelihoods, the environmental and climate change, and Indian move towards net zero in 2070. And lastly is the historic. In 2011, the Asian Development Bank brought out this book called Asia 2050, Realizing the Asian Century. So here it says that Asia is in truly historic transformation, and by 2050, maybe Asia will have 51% of the global GDP. That is what it used to be. And the incomes of the people living in Asia may multiply by 6 times. And so this is the great fall and rise of the Asian GDP as part of the global GDP. So you can see we hit the very bottom in the late last century, and now it is rising. And this is the real data in terms of purchasing power parity, which shows that the top 4 countries in the world are now the Asian economies. And so the Asian century has a promise of making 3 billion people coming out of poverty. And some people, according to Asian Development Bank, has called this possibility the Asian century. So this is the broader context within which we are working. We should never forget that. The second is, having this kind of vision, mission, and so on, we want to look at some of the challenges. And I'm sure you're very familiar with these. I was working at the World Bank, and they brought out this urban development strategy in year 2000. And they had 4 pillars of development: livability, competitiveness, good governance and management, and bankability. I was given the job of reviewing what the World Bank was doing in terms of the livability pillar, which is the end result of everything what we do. And what we found is that at the time, World Bank defined risk, environmental risk in cities related to only infrastructure and pollution. You can see that there is no risk related to climate change in this figure. So we were given the job of looking at all the projects And what we found was that the World Bank's work on urban infrastructure and environment was related to 4 different goals. The last goal, which you see in maroon color, preventing and mitigating urban impacts of natural disasters and climate change, wasn't there. So we added and we called this thing our expanded brown agenda. Since then, we have come a long way, and I'm sure you know these 5 scenarios on climate change, on average temperature rise by 2100. The fossil fueled one, which we do not want, will lead us to about 4.5 degrees Celsius average temperature rise. And the sustainability scenario is what we need, which is to keep the average temperature rise below 1.5 degrees Celsius. This is a world map in hexagons, and the green hexagons, including South Asia, Southeast Asia, they show the human contribution to heavy precipitation. So all the floods that you see, inundations all around Asia and other parts of the world, is purely a result of human contribution. And things are likely to get worse. This is a map showing in 1950 and 2020 the coastal cities or coastal settlements, if you like, which will be affected by the sea level rise or flooding types of. And it's not only the developing countries that are affected. This news from US says that 1 out of 10 residents of US would be affected, and this can already be seen in cities like Miami. I guess some of you are familiar with this global city ranking, and you see most of these cities are in Asia Pacific. On the left, you see the potentiality of people getting affected. On the right is the physical assets, including infrastructure. And only a couple of cities in the US, which are shown in black text, are non-Asian. And we often focus on flooding, but there is the heat wave and urban heat index, and there are so many things that are happening related to heat, and it affects many sectors. Now coming to the massive gaps, there's a lot being done, as we say, and this is a map published in a journal article in Nature Sustainability 2-3 years ago, and this shows the existing stock of infrastructure, which is like in the red semicircle, and the blue semicircle is the need by 2040. And so that amount is mentioned in $1 trillion. So if you look at the Indian graph, it seems that the stock right now that we have is about $1 trillion US, and maybe we need about $5 trillion of investments, and maybe that is already outdated. So there is a lot of demand and big gaps. One of the reasons this is happening is because of economic growth, which a lot of geographers and planners know that goes hand in hand with urbanization. So there is a pattern of growth towards larger and larger cities, which we can see around our country and around the world. If we break down the growth of cities between now and 2100 and divide it by the developing regions, we find that 1.2 billion people will be added to Asia. Every year it comes to 34 million people, which means that in Asia we have to produce infrastructure not only to match the gap, but also to add for the new residents who will be joining. So how are we doing on SDGs? This is the Asia Pacific report. This is published every year, and this is from February this year. A new one will come soon. The middle line that you see is the middle point of 2023, and none of the SDGs is any close to getting there. Actually, the climate change SDG is regressing. It's going backward. That's why it's shown in the red. So there's no very good news about SDGs. And I think everybody who works on these, they are well aware of the. Then problem comes when you have poverty, you have climate change and underserviced settlements. Right now, the world has about 57% population living in cities, so that is a little bit more than 4 billion. And 1/4 of them, which means every fourth resident in cities, lives in a slum or an informal settlement. So that's a huge problem, and these are the people who will be most affected by climate change and other eventualities of that nature. We have air pollution problem, which is not only a problem of infrastructure, monitoring systems, and so on, which are lagging behind, but also that it kills a lot of people. So 7 million people die of air pollution. It's called a silent killer. And 4.9 million people die of air pollution in Asia. WHO has not published, perhaps they might be publishing a figure for India, and that is something to take into account. It has a lot of impacts on health. Coming to the water pollution, now industries, and India is fast urbanizing, industries and human settlements, cities and towns especially, they discharge wastewater, effluents, and so on. Now, what we found when we were doing the Asian Cities Report, and I also serve on the board of the World Cities Report these days, what we find is that most developing country cities, either they do not have capacity or the funds to build wastewater treatment plants. And this is the main reason why the rivers are polluted. Some of the rivers carry froth, if you have seen Yamuna in Delhi. So what we find is that all the countries have environmental laws and legislation which actually were developed from 1980s and 90s. There was this whole drift towards sustainable development in those days, but their enforcement is lacking. So there's a lot of corruption, there is bribery, and so on. I mean, we don't have to spell out all the words. And so this is a huge problem if we are going to make progress. This is a very interesting chart. It correlates decarbonization challenge and the capacity to pay. So related to green infrastructure transition. And I would like to draw your attention to the right bottom, which is the gray section, where it shows that these countries, and India is there, IN, which is put there, that these are countries with low emissions, and they have low amounts of infrastructure and low capacity or financial resources to develop. So if you look at this chart, it clearly shows that we are perfectly suited for innovation in sustainable infrastructure. And I mean, no wonder that this conference is focused on such an important theme. Now, looking at all those things, what should be guiding our work in terms of some of the key principles? And here, of course, we start by the global consensus on the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which is nowhere to stay. I have heard that after 2 years, the post-2030 development agenda will start to be developed, starting in 2027. And there are plethora of UN documents, you can fancy whichever you like. The latest one is the Pact for the Future, which puts a lot of emphasis on the work of and the involvement of youth. And so I see a lot of youth in this room, and so you have a lot of responsibility going forward. I also found that the World Economic Forum has a council for infrastructure, and they have pulled out all the key principles which are from the UN and other infrastructure agencies, development agencies, and they broadly fall in these 6 categories: benefit sharing, environmental resilience, social accountability, economic and institutional effectiveness, future proofing, as well as critical mass potential. And I don't have to literally go through that. You can easily access this information, but it underlines some of the key principles that we need to focus. And we always have to highlight the New Urban Agenda with its commitments to equality, environment, and prosperity. Now, when we think of infrastructure development, we really need to think long term. We don't build infrastructure for 5 years or 10 years, although we work with investment plans which may be 5 or 10 years long. So when we start to put our pencil and paper on the drawing board, we really have to look for maybe 100 years, maybe 150 years, because the infrastructure that was built in Europe and US, which is now coming to the need of redevelopment, was built about 100 years ago. So if we are going to build and make huge investments of trillions of dollars, that will be for 100 or more than that number of years. And so there are different types of funds around the world. Of course, there are the multilateral development banks, but there are funds like the Green Climate Fund. And I'm just sharing with you some of the key principles, because they have developed these 10 sector guides. Instead of just showing you the cover, I'm sharing with you some of the pathways in different sectors that these agencies have come. So there is a lot of knowledge in terms of what should be our guiding principles. And this is a map of Bangkok. So in this last line you see, for cities, we need compact and resilient urban development, right? This is a map of Bangkok. We already know that Indonesia has moved its capital, or is in the process of building a new one called Nusantara. And these 3 shades of blue, the dark blue says that the average height or altitude of Bangkok city is 0 meters above sea level. So if we are guaranteed 1 meter sea level rise by 2100 in the next 75 years or so, this city will have to move. And so this is the different pathways continued. Various principles are there for infrastructure development. Some nature-based solutions, ecosystem-based adaptation that we can use in infrastructure development, including in cities. Bring in more and more green, which not only helps to sequester carbon, but also to recharge groundwater, reduce flooding, and so on. Various other ways in which the climate dimension can be integrated, and we can move towards the green transition in terms of infrastructure. Now we come to the last part of my presentation, which is related to policy and decision making. And here we cannot escape the global context of multilateral governance. And this is a picture that I'm sharing, which shows that actually national government is at the center of doing everything. And above the national government, not literally above, but they get inspiration from international agendas, conventions, and treaties. So there may be global level and regional meaning continental level agreements that national governments are asked to honor. And then within countries you have regional, city level, and local level, village level governments. You have different stakeholders, which are the vertical columns, and then the depth of the cube shows the various sectors. So this is, you can pick the cube you want to work on, and you will have to work within this multi-institutional context. So one example of a green development project from China, which is partly funded by the Asian Development Bank, and the idea here is that 1 unit of investments from public sector harnesses 5 units of private sector investment by giving them concessional finance. And so these are the both climate change mitigation as well as adaptation projects can be funded. So also to check how the investment can be made more climate friendly. And lastly, to support governments for a better project development. And so the idea would be that when we are making policies, we integrate the sustainable development agenda in the process. I have a few more minutes, I'll be finishing soon. The second project that I would like to share is where the participation between the city government and the local people becomes very important, because as I mentioned earlier, 1/4 of the populations are living in informal settlements, and in developing countries this is more and more the case. So how do we move from the arrangement of an ad hoc kind of relationship, which will be reactive or opportune, to managerial and comprehensive? So I'll show you a small case from Mongolia, a project that I recently evaluated, funded by the Adaptation Fund. So this is to build flood resilience in the informal settlements in Mongolia, where winter temperatures go down to -40 degrees Celsius, and the ground is permanently frozen up to 3 meters deep. So we realize that that community participation is very important, because they are the ones who own the land there. So it is different from other informal settlements in other countries, and they can even move their houses, which are temporary, to provide way for the laying down of underground infrastructure. And this kind of process involves a lot of people, because if we have to make these people resilient, then they have to be organized, they have to be registered as legal entities, and they should become our partners in resilient development of infrastructure. And so this shows that households, about 2,000, were organized into primary groups, and how they work together, how they become the implementers in the process, in the design of the infrastructure. So these are some of the principles that we will require when we have to work with local residents in cities and other settlements. So coming back to our focus, we have gone through the overall vision and mission, which is the Asian century as well as developed India. We looked at some of the challenges, and they are very huge. Then you have the massive gaps in the infrastructure development, some of the guiding factors, and the issues of policy decision making and governance. So with that, I thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, sir. That indeed is a powerful keynote address. We set a framework discussing the Asian century, touching upon the aspirational and cultural dimensions, developmental dimensions from Amritkal to Vikasit Bharat, navigating our ways through climate change, poverty, and learning ways to create a resilient ecosystem. Moving to the next segment, the Book of Abstract. The release of the Book of Abstract stands as testimony to the scholarly rigor and innovative spirit of this conference. The Book of Abstract is edited by Professor Rachna Gangwar and Dr. Anurima Mukherjee Basu. May I request dignitaries present on stage to step forward and release the Book of Abstract. With a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, the release of the Book of Abstract. Now I'll request the dignitaries to release the conference compendium, publication of the selected research papers of previous conference. The book is titled Infrastructure Development, Theory, Practice and Policy, edited by Professor Rachna Gangwar, Dr. Astha Agarwala, Dr. Sandhya Srikumar, and published by Routledge, Taylor and Francis Group. The book encapsulates the collective efforts of the researchers, offering a glimpse into the transformative ideas shaping infrastructure management and sustainability. Thank you, dignitaries on stage. Moving forward, it is my great honor to introduce our chief guest of the event, Professor Arun Sharma, recipient of Royal Order of Australia, a celebrated academic and researcher with an impressive career spanning over 3 decades. Professor Sharma currently serves as a distinguished professor emeritus at the Queensland University of Technology and is an advisor to the chairman of the Adani Group, where he leads the group's sustainability function. Additionally, he chairs the Council of QIMR Berghofer Medical Research Institute, reflecting his broad influence and leadership in various significant sectors. He completed his PhD in computer science from State University of New York at Buffalo. Beyond academia, Professor Sharma has played a pivotal role in the development of Australia's ICT research capability. He co-founded National ICT Australia Limited, and he has been instrumental in establishing internationally leading programs in robotics and data science. He served as a member of the World Economic Forum Global Future Council on Innovation Ecosystems. Professor Sharma has fostered business, research, and cultural links between Australia and India. With a round of applause, we welcome Professor Sharma to share his words of wisdom with us.
Can you hear me? Yeah. This is the second edition of the conference. And I do recall that I even gave a keynote address at the first event. And I saw the paper that I wrote in the booklet for the first time. It's there. It's a privilege to be there, to be here. Ravi has already given you the strides that India is making in infrastructure development. He has given you the statistics, but we are just at the beginning of what is required. Bharat has given the global context that the challenges facing India are not India's alone. They are for much of Asia. And the global community has to find solutions that bring different dimensions to it. So what I'm going to tell you about is the perspective on the challenge facing India and how this is an opportunity too. It's very simple. We just have to understand there is no way India can grow its energy and its infrastructure like the West did or even as China did. If India were to do this, forget about 1.5 or 2, we are facing 4 degrees Celsius. So India has the unenviable task of undertaking energy transition and build its infrastructure, and the two are linked, as I will delve into, but do so responsibly. A country of this immense scale has never faced a challenge. And by all accounts, India is beginning to live up to the challenge. And in addressing this challenge is the great opportunity that India has. So, yeah? Okay. And so, what we have to talk about is what is this energy transition business? What is this decarbonization business? And what is this infrastructure business? Okay, and how they are all linked. What does it take to decarbonize almost every sector of the economy? And why some of it is different for India? I will talk about it. I will also talk about it. I'll also talk about the fact that the kind of professionals we need for this next phase. What is a sustainability mindset in a professional, and how an institution like the Adani University has a role to play in this? And then I will talk about the fact that we have to get these projects going. They need to be funded. And everyone complains that there is not enough money. And then when you talk to the financiers, they say, we got so much money for do good finance, but we can't find projects. So there's something missing here. And how we can sort of address that. What is the thing that is missing? What role does technology has to play? And in doing this, what is India's competitive advantage where it not only can build its infrastructure, undertake the energy transition, but help similar geographies struggling with the same challenge do so, create export opportunity, and by bringing down the cost of equipment that goes into the energy transition and infrastructure, help the West decarbonize. That's the scale of the challenge that we're talking about. So, a very simple fact. India's energy requirements are going to be significant. It has to grow multiple-fold. And I can tell you one thing when I talk to the chairman. Every prediction about electricity demand for India is wrong, wrong, wrong. Okay? We haven't figured out how much electricity we are going to need. And the reason is going to be fairly clear when I talk about decarbonization. And India has to build the infrastructure in a sustainable way if its people have to live or enjoy the quality of life they deserve. And therein lies the challenge. So, what is decarbonization? But before I talk about it, we also have to understand that India doesn't have to be lectured by the people who have actually created much of the mess that we are facing today. Okay? India's priorities are completely different. And let me give you 4 priorities, possibly in that order. The order might change. India's first and foremost priority is energy security. India wants to become free of energy imports by 2047. And why that is important? Because it spends over $200 billion a year in energy imports. It's a debilitating yoke on the Indian economy. Can you imagine that kind of foreign exchange freedom for well-being of people, infrastructure development? That will be a game changer. So energy security is its first priority. The second priority is the air quality in its cities. And that is different from greenhouse emissions. Air quality is a local problem. You're burning a lot of diesel. You are getting farming waste, and you are burning it. You have heavy-duty trucks coming. You are using coal, thermal power to produce electricity in the city itself. They all lead to particulate emission. Whereas greenhouse emission is carbon dioxide or methane, or there are other gases, even water vapor, that have different global warming impact. And that, you won't feel it. America claims to have the best air and water in the world, but it doesn't mean that it is not causing global warming. So that's the thing that is important. For India, the air quality in its cities is of far greater immediate importance because it's a public health disaster. And I don't want to quote people, but some people tell me that the life expectancy in Delhi is several years lower because of what's happening there. I was in Delhi yesterday, and I was sort of sneezing. The moment I landed in Ahmedabad, I was feeling better. We all have experienced that. The third priority is decarbonization. How does India decarbonize all sectors of its economy? And the fourth priority, and no one would have dreamt this, India can dare to be a net exporter of green energy for the first time in its history. And this is where green hydrogen and its derivatives come into play, and I will talk about it. So, that's the priority. Given this is the priority, what is decarbonization? People make it far too complicated. It's simple. Electrify, electrify, electrify. The idea is you electrify your operations, try to remove as much fossil fuel as you can. Okay? And hopefully, the grid that you are using will become less carbon intensive as you put more and more renewable electricity in the grid. Okay? You might use biofuels. Okay? And that's also carbon neutral because when you use the biomass to produce fuel, it just returns the carbon dioxide back to the atmosphere that the plants took from the atmosphere in growing. So biofuels is fine. But the challenge with biofuels is it's limited. It's not scalable. And the moment you have a use case of biomass, the price of biomass goes up. Okay? But that's where we have to sort of also look at what models are going to be. Then you have to use circular economy so that you use less material, you try to reuse things. So these are simple things that you can apply. They often will help you with scope 1 emission, what is called in the language, that the emissions linked to your operations. Scope 2 emission is the electricity that you buy for your operation or heat that you buy for your operation. And that you can easily decarbonize if you start sourcing greater and greater portions of renewable electricity. And so as the renewable electricity capacity goes up, that will happen. And then there's something called scope 3 emission. It's very complicated. You have to account for the upstream emission of all your suppliers and the downstream emission of all the people that you sell your products to, how it's transported. In an ideal world, if everyone addressed their scope 1 and scope 2 emission, then no one will have to worry about their scope 3 emission. Okay? But it's not an ideal world. So what we have to do is we have to incentivize our upstream suppliers to use low emission products, and we have to give discounts to our buyers if they don't produce too much emissions going forward. This is the very simple fact. But it also is a case when we look at infrastructure and the energy transition, there is a question about green molecules that becomes important because renewables are intermittent, so we have to have energy storage solutions. And this is where we have to be thankful to the Chinese because they took technology from Australia's University of New South Wales, where I used to work a long time ago, quarter century ago, and the Fraunhofer, and spent $160 billion to reduce the cost of photovoltaics. The German government had the feed-in tariffs that created the demand. And now they have done the same thing with utility scale batteries. And so they are beginning to address the intermittency, and in India we are doing pumped storage together with renewables. That also is going to help. But it's also clear that in the long term, we have to have a green molecule, which is green hydrogen, that will be the last mile in the round-the-clock electricity. We may not need it, but it will be required for the decarbonization of most hard-to-abate sectors. Okay? And here is a news flash. India is positioning itself as the world's lowest cost green hydrogen producer. And I'll give you some examples of why India is doing it. So, why is green hydrogen the last mile for the decarbonization of most hard-to-abate sectors? The reason is very straightforward, that in America, in Middle East, people say, okay, keep burning fossil fuel, we'll capture the carbon dioxide, and we will store it underground, okay? First of all, India does not have proven reserves of storage for carbon dioxide. And the jury is still out whether there will be post-storage emission leakage, okay? But if you are an oil and gas producer, that's your way of continuing your business model, so it's getting a lot of traction. That is not a solution for India. So let us look at infrastructure, and let's keep it very simple. What are the two things that you need for India's infrastructure build-up going forward? We need more houses, we need more roads, more airports, more ports and everything. What are the two materials you need? Steel and cement. They are the two worst sectors. Okay, they are the two worst sectors in terms of decarbonization. Okay, now the solution for steel, what you do with steel is you require almost equal amount of iron ore and metallurgical coal. And so then you reduce it and then you put it in a blast furnace. It is extremely emission intensive. So the solution now is, instead of using metallurgical coal, you combine the iron ore with green hydrogen. And what is green hydrogen? It is made by the electrolysis of water. And if the electricity used is renewable, then that is green hydrogen. And if you burn that hydrogen to produce energy, there is no emission, okay? You might have some emission, upstream emission, because you use solar modules and wind, turbines to produce it. But post-combustion, if you have hydrogen, you don't have any combustion. So you use hydrogen instead of coking coal to convert the iron ore into something called sponge iron. And that sponge iron can directly be used in electric arc furnaces. And if your electric arc furnaces are using renewables, then you have green steel, okay? Let me now come to cement. You know that the Adani Group produces 90 million tons of cement a year. You know what is the annual production capacity of United States? 93 million tons. It is in maintenance mode. Whereas our cement capacity, ours, Kumar Mangalam Bigada, is bigger than that. India needs to multiply its cement production multiple fold if we have to build the infrastructure. So when we decided to buy Holcim's asset, Holcim had already signed up for the cement business to become net zero by 2050. There is a science-based target initiative where you have to come up with a plan. But when they signed up that, they had full intention of selling their Indian assets. Okay, there is enough storage for carbon dioxide in Northern Europe that they had a pathway for decarbonization, but there was no way they could do with the Indian asset. When we bought the asset, no one would have complained that we will renege on the science-based target initiative of 2050 because it's impossible. But we decided that if the Adani Group, with its renewable scale, is not able to do it, no one on the planet can do it. So what are we doing now? Well, already the cement business has invested in a gigawatt renewable capacity that is captive, and that will go a long way. But there will be some level of carbon dioxide that will have to be captured. Our cement business is using a lot of circular economy. So on average, per capita, 1 ton of cement, we have emissions of around 520 kilograms of carbon dioxide. A typical American cement plant has 800 to 900 kilograms. What we do is we use slag from blast furnace and we use fly ash from thermal power. So we are using a lot of circular economy to reduce the emission of our cement plant. But we will have to capture the carbon dioxide, a couple of 100 kilograms, to meet the IEA's net zero standard. Now, everyone knows that carbon can be captured. It's the cost. Now, that business model doesn't work unless there is a huge price on carbon like Europe. Then there is an investment you will make in carbon capture, because it could be $50 to $60 per ton of carbon dioxide that you are capturing. What we do then is we also have a green hydrogen business. The green hydrogen business is going to produce low-cost hydrogen, and it is going to convert that into ammonia or methanol for export, okay? Now, methanol needs carbon. If you get the carbon from biomass, then it's a carbon-neutral methanol. But if you get it from an industrial process, you are reusing the carbon dioxide, and the European Union is prepared to pay you a premium because it's reused industrial process carbon dioxide. So we now are looking at creating a business model where the carbon dioxide is captured from cement, and the cement business sells the carbon dioxide to the hydrogen business, which uses it to make methanol. And we will get the business model going by selling it to the Europeans, which are prepared to pay a premium so that we can compete with the natural gas produced methanol coming out of the Middle East or United States. Now, but that's not enough, because the carbon dioxide, if the Europeans burn it in a ship or something, will go back into the atmosphere. Now what happens is, when the cost of green hydrogen comes to $1.5 a kilogram, right now in India it's under $3 in Europe it is $5 to $6 okay? But as the solar costs are coming down, they are 40% of the capital expenditure. By between 2030 and 2035, we will be in that $1.5 range. At $1.5, that methanol can be converted into PVC. And PVC is a building material, and that will effectively store the carbon dioxide for 100 years. Right now, it's produced from natural gas or fossil fuels. But at $1.5, the green hydrogen becomes exactly the same in energy equivalence to a $12 per MMBTU of natural gas that is imported. And that's the price of natural gas that has been there in India over a decade, except during the COVID, it had a dip. So that's how we are thinking. We've seen steel, we have seen this. Shipping. It is very clear that the International Maritime Organization at this stage is going to make a decision in April 2025 that will move shipping to a net zero pathway of 2030. And it is looking at mechanisms by green fuels like green ammonia or green methanol can be actually started. And that is important. And in the long term, green ammonia is the main fuel for shipping, because green methanol will have other uses. And there is a sector that is even more important or can pay more money for green methanol, and that is the aviation sector. So for them, there is no solution right now except via biomass and green methanol. And so that is happening, and so green hydrogen is a solution to the shipping area. Now, why is India absolutely positioned to take advantage of it? Because we have one of the lowest renewable energy costs in the world. And 2/3 of the cost of green hydrogen is the cost of renewable energy. Okay, it is not, everyone gets fixated on electrolyzers. You can't deliver gigascales and gigawatt of renewable energy, you are a non-starter in the green hydrogen space. We have been allocated land for 45 gigawatt, which is enough to produce 2.5 million tons of hydrogen, which can only be used for hydrogen. So from there, we will be able to make ammonia, we will be able to make methanol, and other players in the Indian context are also looking at it. So we are pushing that IMO should put that restriction. So blue ammonia coming out of natural gas sequestration reserve is not a viable option, so that it has to be strict. Who would have thought that India or the Indian renewable energy companies want the most stringent regulations on these materials because we are prepared to supply and deliver it. We are into airports. Now, we can easily decarbonize airports, except the problem is we also have to take into account the airline emission when the aircraft is within 3,000 feet. And that is 90% of the emission. So unless sustainable aviation fuel is decarbonized, our airport business has no hope of decarbonizing. So I just wanted to give you the context of how well India is positioned right now, okay? And how the Adani Group, like, it's almost a privilege to worry about decarbonization of 11 different sectors. But we are able to do, like, the cement business can capture the carbon dioxide, the hydrogen business will buy it. So right now they're both fighting, the two CEOs are fighting about the price, okay? But that's a good place to be in. Anyway, so this is what we are talking about. India is extremely well positioned. I hope I have been able to explain to you how the energy transition and the infrastructure story, cement and steel being the two most carbon intensive materials used in infrastructure, are inextricably linked. Okay, what does it mean for our students, our professionals? What we need is a sustainability mindset. And what I mean by sustainability mindset, especially in the infrastructure space or any large-scale engineering project, is that you understand technology, you understand process, you understand the business model, you understand ROI, because that's you have to do to finish your assignments, your group discussion, so that you can pass. And some of those skills, like, actually do translate into the real world. But now we have to prepare our graduates to think differently. Yes, you have to do all those things, but the material that you are using in your projects, they have their own carbon footprint. And that carbon footprint depends on the process that was used to make those materials. Was it a green steel or came out of blast furnace? Okay, so we have to teach our students the idea of every time you look at a material, oh, it's a cost. But what is its carbon footprint? That has to come in parallel. Then you're going to follow an industrial process or a manufacturing process or a construction process. That comes with its own carbon footprint. So you understand that carbon footprint of the process and the material to understand what is the carbon footprint of your entire project. And then you do simulations on what is the carbon price. Maybe India doesn't have a carbon price, but you're trying to sell to Europe. And they have this carbon border adjustment tax, where if you have used renewable energy in your manufacturing process, you have used low emission intensive material, you will not be taxed when you export to the Europe. So those things our professionals will have to start thinking. The ROI then will have to take a new business model into account. And we have to prepare our graduates to think in this new way going forward. Let me now talk very briefly, and how am I doing with time? I'll take 2 more minutes, 2, 3 minutes. The challenge is that there are so many sustainable projects around, and they're all complaining that we can't get money. And then I go to all these forums like COP and New York Climate Week, and there are all these do-good finance people that are trying to say we are chasing good projects. There is lack of trust. Okay. And why there is lack of trust? Because people who have this do-good finance have their own governance mechanism. And when they have their own governance mechanism, they want to make sure that they don't make a mistake that someone is actually claiming the project to be sustainable, but it is not sustainable. Now, this is where we have to address trust. And this is where technology can play a role. Almost 10 years ago, I used to make speeches on blockchain. I used to be a computer scientist in my previous life. And at that time, I think I do recall standing up and talking about the Bitcoin being $1,000 at the time. Today it is $100,000, just 10 years. Okay, every problem had a blockchain solution. Remember those days? Actually, it may be that the time of blockchain has come in. If I'm selling green hydrogen to Europe, how do I convince them that this is green and not blue? That my ship didn't sort of like, moored in Saudi Arabia and pumped some blue into the mix and went there. So what we need is a blockchain layer on the industrial process, the logistics process, even where small project proponents can verify their carbon emissions in terms of the material they have used and put it on the blockchain, so a funder can actually check that this is there. A lot of work will be required, it'll be there, but eventually we have to start using technology. And I know everyone is talking about AI, but I want to say, okay, go back to blockchain, because it's a question of trust. And again, universities should start looking at these things, because there are people who are interested in blockchain. Finally, the subject of infrastructure growth and climate. Let me give you an anecdote. The climate and infrastructure are inextricably linked. 90% of the Indian population lives in subtropical climate. There is a difference between subtropical and tropical. There are parts of South India that are tropical. Tropical is Singapore. If I had my way, I'll put a glass dome and air condition the whole thing. But subtropical is where 9 months of the year, the outside temperature and the inside temperature in your house are almost the same. I recall as a kid going to my ancestral village in Bihar, and most men used to sleep most of the year outside in a khatia, okay, overnight, because that's subtropical climate for you. I don't know if it still happens, and this is where the British invented the Indian bungalow, okay, which had a area around it. It was open to this, and this idea was taken to Australia at the turn of last century into a new architecture called Queenslanders. The Queenslander is a home that is like a bungalow using Australian material. And then I recall 20 years ago, I came with the Australian Queensland Chief Minister, and I went to one of the resorts on the way to Pune. I think it was Amberley or something. And the people who make Queenslanders had brought that technology to India, a full circle, for a subtropical climate. Much of developing countries, Brazil, Africa, they have subtropical climate. India does not have to build infrastructure so that it has to withstand London and New York cold temperatures. The last time it snowed in Madras or Chennai probably was the last ice age, even then. Okay, so we have to determine our destiny here and then use this to take these technologies elsewhere. And that is where, in this opportunity of energy transition, infrastructure growth, India finds its own solutions, and we take it to the world. And only then it will be financially and economically sustainable. So thank you very much, and I look forward to hearing more about the conference. Yeah.
Thank you very much, sir, for such a thought-provoking address. I need to convey that probably for the first time, we heard such deep messages in some simple words that we will remember and understand India's various priorities and its position. We will remember key words as responsibility and a sustainability mindset. Thank you very much, sir. The inaugural ceremony will remain incomplete without extending our note of appreciation and gratitude to the distinguished guests and speakers of the inaugural function. May I request Professor Ravi P. Singh, Provost, Adani University, to felicitate our chief guest, Professor Arun Sharma. With a round of applause, our appreciation and gratitude to our chief guest. I request Professor Rahul Singh, Dean, Faculty of Management Sciences, to felicitate today's keynote speaker, Professor Bharat Dahiya. We thank you, sir, for being with us. I request Professor Hitesh, Dean, Faculty of Engineering, Science and Technology, to come on stage and felicitate Provost Professor Ravi P. Singh, Adani University. We appreciate your guidance, sir. Thank you very much. It is important to mention our conference partners with gratitude. Our star partner, IR Class Systems and Solutions Private Limited, associate partner, Quality Austria Central Asia, industry partner, Adani Renewables, GIFT, Gujarat International Finance Tech City, Bureau Veritas, knowledge partner, the InfraVision Foundation and FPSB India, and our publishing partner, Routledge Taylor and Francis Group. Conference Chair, Dr. Anurima Mukherjee Basu, I wish to invite you to extend the vote of thanks.
Good morning, everyone. I feel honored and privileged to propose a vote of thanks on behalf of the organizing committee of ICIDS-2024. At the outset, I would like to express our profound gratitude to our conference patron and president of Adani University, Dr. Preeti G. Adani, for her unstinting support to all our endeavors. I must mention a deep sense of appreciation for our chief guest, Professor Arun Sharma, for his address. Sir, the pertinent issues in your speech will form the basis of deliberations during the two-day conference, and we will continue to look towards you for guidance and further inspiration. On behalf of all of us at Adani University, it is my most pleasant duty to offer a very sincere thanks to Professor Bharat Dahiya for the insightful keynote address. Sir, your observations on the current and future challenges of sustainable infrastructure development and green transition will serve as signposts for us. An event like this cannot be organized without the generous support of our sponsors and partners. Our star partner, IR Class Systems and Solutions Private Limited, associate partner, Quality Austria Central Asia, industry partners, Adani Renewables, GIFT City, and Bureau Veritas, knowledge partner, the InfraVision Foundation and FPSB India, and our publishing partner, Taylor and Francis. I extend our appreciation to all our sponsors and partners. Your support has been instrumental in making this event possible and successful. We feel extremely fortunate to be backed by very strong leaders of our university. I, on behalf of the organizing committee, convey deep regards and hearty thanks to our provost, Professor Ravi P. Singh, for motivating us and instilling confidence in us. A special thanks to our registrar, Professor Amish Vyas, Dean Professor Rahul Singh, and Shri Hiren Mandalia for their constant guidance and support in shaping the conference. We are fortunate to have eminent speakers amongst us today. The inaugural session is followed by 4 panel discussions on emerging themes in infrastructure development and sustainability. Our sincere thanks to all the panel speakers, some of whom have traveled long distances to be with us for these 2 days. Finally, I welcome all the delegates in attendance today. This is a unique opportunity to learn from the world's best experts in the infrastructure and sustainability. I promise that you will not be disappointed. Thank you.
The inaugural event has set high expectations, and we look forward to meaningful, in-depth discussions for these 2 days of the conference. Ladies and gentlemen, shall we all rise for the national anthem?
जनगण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मागे गाहे तव जय गाथा जन गण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे
Respecting the time, we will start our first panel discussion within a few minutes. The discussion will be on emerging trends in urban and regional transportation. And we will just take a few minutes to set the stage. Thank you very much, dignitaries on the dais,